Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, think about Kale Central during rush hour. You've got thousands of people, trains, and buses, all moving with this crazy, precise coordination to get everyone exactly where they need to go. Well, today we're exploring a transport system that is way more complex than that. We're talking about the intricate, highly specialized transportation systems that literally keep organisms alive. Because whether you're a human running a marathon or a towering tree reaching up for the sunlight, there is a complex, completely unseen highway system working tirelessly inside you. And we're going to unpack exactly how these systems function, step by step. So, could a microscopic submarine actually cure a blood clot? Well, imagine this for a second. In that classic 1966 sci-fi film, Fantastic Voyage, a team of scientists gets shrunk down to the size of a single red blood cell. They're injected straight into a patient's bloodstream in a tiny submarine, and they have to navigate the literal highways of the human body to destroy a blood clot in the brain. And yeah, while that is definitely pure science fiction, the biological reality of our actual internal transport system is just as mind-blowing. Every single second, a vast network inside you is delivering life-saving cargo to billions, literally billions of cellular destinations. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the need for transport, move on to the blood circulatory system, discuss human blood and donation, check out transport systems in plants, and finally compare animals versus plants.
Starting off with part 1, the need for transport.
Right, so every single cell inside you needs a constant supply of oxygen and nutrients just to survive, plus a way to get rid of toxic waste like carbon dioxide. But how that transport actually happens, that depends entirely on the size of the organism. For simple, unicellular organisms, the solution is super direct. Because they're just so tiny, oxygen and nutrients can diffuse directly through the cell membrane, and the waste just diffuses right back out. Easy, right? But for complex, multicellular organisms, like us humans, vertebrates, and large plants, our volume is just way too large. Diffusion alone would be way too slow to keep us alive. We absolutely need specialized, high-speed transport systems to move materials across those massive cellular distances. Which brings us to Section 2, the blood circulatory system. Now, what's really interesting about this is how mammals actually power this internal highway. We use what's called a double circulatory system, which just means blood flows in two totally distinct circuits. First, you have pulmonary circulation. This is where deoxygenated blood from your body enters the upper right chamber, the right atrium, gets squeezed down into the right ventricle, and is then pumped straight to the lungs to pick up fresh oxygen. Second, you have systemic circulation. That fresh, oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium, moves down into the heavily muscled left ventricle, and then boom, it's violently pumped out through the aorta to your entire body. And the whole time, specialized valves are making sure the traffic only ever moves in one direction. If you've ever listened closely to a heartbeat, you know it makes that very distinct lub-bub sound. Well, a great revision tip here is that the sound is actually the physical slamming shut of the heart's valves. The lub is the valves closing as the heart contracts to pump blood out. That is your systolic pressure. The dub is the valves closing as the heart relaxes and fills back up with blood, and that's your diastolic pressure. Doctors actually measure this mechanical pressure using a rather complicated-sounding instrument called a sphygmomanometer, and for a healthy resting adult, it normally reads around 120/75. Oh, and every time that heart pumps, you can physically feel the throbbing in your arteries. That's your pulse rate, and it tells us exactly how fast this incredible biological engine is running. And honestly, it's amazing how deeply we understand this biological plumbing system today, because when these vital vessels fail, modern medicine can literally rebuild them. A perfect example of this happened in July 2017. Heart specialists at Malaysia's Institute Jantan Negara, or IJN, successfully replaced a patient's badly damaged aorta, which, remember, is that main artery carrying oxygenated blood from the heart, with a completely synthetic one. It is just a stunning example of engineering stepping in to save our biological highways. All right, Section 3, human blood and donation. So a highway system is basically useless without vehicles, right? Well, your blood is actually a complex mixture, and hematologists can physically separate it out using a rapidly spinning machine called a centrifuge. When you spin blood down, you'll actually see cells floating in a yellowish liquid. That liquid is called plasma. Plasma is the primary carrier fluid, and it's made up of about 90% water and 10% dissolved substances. These are critical things like the nutrients your cells are begging for, carbon dioxide waste, enzymes, and hormones. And floating inside this plasma river are your red blood cells for carrying oxygen, your white blood cells for fighting off infection, and your platelets to help your blood clot when you get a cut. But as you probably know, not all blood is identical. Human blood is classified into 4 main groups: A, B, AB, and O. This is all determined by specific markers on the red blood cells called antigens, and corresponding defenders floating in the plasma called antibodies. Here's the catch. If you give someone the wrong blood type during a transfusion, their antibodies will attack the foreign antigens. This causes the blood to violently coagulate, which can absolutely be fatal. Group O is famous as the universal donor because it has no antigens to trigger that attack. On the flip side, Group AB is the universal recipient because it has no anti-A or anti-B antibodies to reject the incoming blood. This is exactly why local hospitals constantly push health tips, urging everyone to know their blood type and keep it listed on their phone's medical ID. In an emergency, knowing this compatibility matrix literally saves precious minutes. Understanding these groups is so vital because every single day, blood is desperately needed for surgeries, accidents, and treating diseases like leukemia. If you're a healthy individual between 18 and 60 years old and you weigh over 45 kilograms, you can donate up to half a liter of blood at a single time. And here is a super fascinating fact for you. Losing that small amount of blood actually forces your bone marrow to go into total overdrive. It starts producing fresh, brand new red blood cells, which often leaves the donor feeling way more energized afterward. Okay, let's move to and see how this builds in section 4. Transport systems in plants. Plants are these massive, multicellular organisms that need to get water all the way up to their highest leaves, but they don't have a heart to pump it. So how do they actually pull that off? Upward water movement in plants relies heavily on something called transpiration. Basically, this is the loss of water vapor through tiny little openings in the leaves called stomata. These openings are tightly controlled by specialized guard cells that open and close the pores. As water evaporates out, it creates this natural suction pull, drawing more water all the way up from the roots. And things like high temperatures, intense sunlight, and dry, windy air, all of those environmental factors cause the guard cells to keep the stomata open wider, forcing the plant to pull water up even faster. So, the crucial point here is that transpiration deals entirely with water vapor, but plants also lose water in liquid form too, through a process called guttation. This happens through special little structures called hydrothodes, which are located right at the edges of the leaves. Guttation usually kicks in at night or when the air humidity is incredibly high, basically when transpiration can't happen easily. Now, it's really important not to confuse guttation with regular morning dew. Dew is just water vapor from the outside atmosphere condensing onto the leaf surface. Guttation, on the other hand, is water being physically pushed out from inside the plant itself. Now, inside the plant stem, all this transport happens through specialized pathways called vascular bundles. But unlike human blood, which all flows together in one system, plants have 2 totally separate, unconnected pipelines. First, you have the xylem. It pulls water and dissolved minerals strictly upward from the roots to the leaves. Then you have the phloem. The phloem acts as a delivery system, transporting the glucose that was synthesized during photosynthesis downward to the stems and the roots. A classic revision tip for you: if you ever see an exam question about the ringing experiment, where a ring of bark is carefully removed from a tree branch, the area just above the ring will actually swell up over time. Why? Because the phloem has been cut, causing all that downward traveling food to get physically trapped. And finally, section 5, animals versus plants. When you put these 2 totally distinct biological systems side by side, the similarities and the differences are pretty striking. Both of them are highly evolved solutions to the exact same biological problem, transporting water, nutrients, and dissolved substances just to keep a complex organism alive. Yet, the way they are engineered is entirely different. Animals rely on this closed, connected, tubular system featuring a central mechanical pump, the heart, and a whole series of valves to strictly control the direction of flow. Plants, on the other hand, achieve massive vertical lift using a system of completely separate vessels, the xylem and phloem, and they do it without any mechanical pump or valves, relying entirely on physical forces like transpiration and guttation to do the heavy lifting. It really leaves us with a profound thought about the incredible engineering of nature. On one hand, you have the human heart, a mechanical marvel firing electrical impulses to pump a specialized fluid through miles of connected vessels every single second of your life. On the other hand, you have a towering tree. It stands completely still, yet it silently pulls hundreds of gallons of water, hundreds of feet into the air, using nothing but the physics of evaporation and specialized microscopic tubes. So I'll leave you with this. Which biological transport system do you find more impressive? It's just a fantastic reminder of how wonderfully complex life truly is. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible science happening inside and all around you.